أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, dear comrades, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to begin by reciting this phrase that you might have seen in the end of the last Fire at Will video that was just released on the 1st of Muharram last night. And it's a phrase from Sayyid Hassan Nasrullah where he says, وَعِندَمَا يَخْرُجْ هَذَا الْمَهْدِي لَنْ يَبْقَى مَلِكُ الظَّالِمِ وَلَا عَمِيرٌ مُسْتَبِدٌ وَلَا طَاغِيَةٌ مُفْسِدٌ سَيَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ قَسْطًا وَعَدْلًا بَعْدَ أَنْ مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا. So he says, when this Mahdi rises, no unjust king or oppressive ruler or arrogant tyrant will be left on the face of the earth. None of them will be spared. And the Mahdi alayhi salam is going to establish justice and equity in the world just as it had been established, just as injustice and inequity had been established previously. The first thing that I would like everybody to do is ask this fundamental question, which is central to everybody's lives right now. And that question is this: do you believe that the zuhur of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam is close or not? Do you believe that this is Akhirul Zaman, the final era before his uprising, or not? Because if you believe in that, then many of the other things that we tell you will make sense. You will accept them. But if you don't believe that, and you still think that Dhuhur and Qiyam of Imam al-Hujjat al-Qa'im al-Mahdi alayhi salam is very far away, is maybe 100 years away, maybe 1,000 years away, maybe 10,000 years away, then you're never going to be willing to accept many of the revelations that we reveal to you. Previously, if you listened to Sayyid Abdullah's lecture, you noticed that he was alluding to a lot of these things. Much of what has happened to the Ummah today is the fact that they have moved away from the Sunnah. They have moved away from Islam. They have moved away, of course, from the Quran. It is but just a melody on their tongue, something for people to praise, something that people will put on so that they can fall asleep listening to it, something that people might listen to just for the divine reward and ajr of it. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself say about the Quran? He says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is the book, there is no crookedness, no deviation, no inaccuracies in it. a guidance for those who have taqwa. Guidance is the real thing for which this Quran was sent. Guidance is what this Quran is all about. Now, I was asked maybe years ago by somebody in a live Q&A session, does Imam Khamenei know the Imam of the time? Does Imam Khamenei have a connection to the Imam of the time? Back then, I answered honestly, and I said, I don't know. I really don't know. You'll notice that when he's giving lectures, he'd hold a piece of paper in his hand. And back then I said, I've always wondered what he has written on that piece of paper and why his lectures are based on what that piece of paper has on it. Are these perhaps points that he has gained from the Imam of the time? Today, I'm going to say publicly for everybody out there to know that this man is a man who knows the Imam of the time. In fact, many of the great policies of Imam Khamenei have been derived directly from Imam Zaman alayhi salam. For example, the policy of unity directly from Imam Zaman. For example, the policy of Palestine. And you might be wondering, why was Palestine given so much importance? Why does he emphasize so much on Palestine? Why does he push so much for Palestine? It's because it is a directive from the Imam of the time. For example, when it comes to his policies to the West and the Western youths, many of these great policies that Imam Khamenei, Salamullah has talked about have been from the Imam of the time. Now, again, this is going to be very difficult for some people to accept, and you're going to question, how does he know? What is he saying? Look, before when I was asked, I answered honestly, I don't know. Now I'm telling you, and after everything that has passed, and with serious reflection, you have to understand that this is no ordinary man. Allah has blessed him with knowledge. Allah has given him guidance. He is holding on to the rope of Allah. Literally, he is holding on to the rope of Allah. Literally, by literally, I mean the Imam of the time. Another way that you can look at that rope of Allah is, of course, the Quran itself. Hablillah, it's referred to. In the Quran, when we say Hablillah, those who hold on to the rope of Allah, Jami'an wa la tafarraqu, hold on to it firmly and don't be divided. That Hablillah, what is it? If you go to the Hadith, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam describe the Quran and they say it is a rope, a divine rope going into the heavens. It is a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, one of the things through which Imam Khamenei has been guided is the Imam of the time. And another thing through which he has been guided is the Holy Quran itself. You see, when you see that Imam Khamenei said, for example, he was asked a question about Israel in the next 25 years, and then he just laughed it off and he said, huh? Israel's not going to exist in the next 25 years, right? And that leads up to 2040, the year 2040. Of course, 2040 is maximum. By maximum 2040, Israel, there'll be no such thing as Israel anymore. We're going to be, it's Muharram, we're supposed to be sad, but it does give you a sense of happiness to just think of an Israel-free world. A beautiful world. How unimaginable is that? Imagine the independence of all the Muslim nations. Imagine a world where America doesn't have any business in the West anyway, right? America's already on their downfall. The entire Western world is going to collapse pretty soon because they have based all of their economic foundations on usury because the Jews wanted to control them. And so if you really look at it, it's like a balloon that's blowing up. An economic analyst was talking about it like a balloon that's getting bigger and bigger. Eventually it has to pop. It's going to be a very big pop because if you have a small balloon and it blows up a little bit and it just goes pop, this is a blooming big balloon. I mean, they have so much money. It's revolting, actually. Now, that balloon, when it pops, it's going to be very big, it's going to be apocalyptic. And I want to share this hadith with you also, which chimes to this sentiment that look, you might have all heard that before the Zuhur, one of the signs is that there will be a red death and a white death, right? Through the red death and the white death, red death meaning war, white death meaning disease and famine, etc. Two-thirds of the world population are going to be completely wiped out. Huh. And you think to yourself, how is that possible? That's really scary. Somebody came to the Imam alayhi salam and said, I'm scared. I don't want to see that. Two-thirds of the world population, mind you, the world population back then was far smaller than it is right now. If you actually calculate it, if you do a search for it and see what was the population of the human race back in the time of Jesus, back in the time of the Holy Prophet, it's unbelievably smaller than it is now. So, what we're talking about is a great event that's going to wipe out a huge, a tremendous, unthinkable number of people on earth. And so this man was talking to the Imam of the time. I believe it was Imam Sadiq, it might have been Imam Baqir alayhi salam. And he says, I'm scared of that. The Imam says, don't worry. Aren't you assured? Don't you feel self-assured that you're going to be among the ones who are saved? And so there is in this idea that the Muslim world, the Arab world, the Middle Eastern world will not partake in that great war and destruction that's going to encompass the rest of the planet. We're talking about the fall of both the East and the West. And in many ways, the region of the Muslims is such a special region. It's almost like the Ark of Noah. And if you just think about it for a moment, the Jews, they could have chosen any region on earth. And yet, which region did they choose? This region. They are insistent that they have to establish it in Palestine. The Jewish state has to be established where? In Palestine. The Middle East, the Levant, Sham. Why? There's many other reasons, of course. They have Baytul Muqaddas there, the whole prophecies, all the prophecies that they have about the red heifer and all the rest of it. There's those things as well. But one of the reasons may be this. They are not like us. Sorry, rather, they're not like us because they're evildoers and they want to spread tyranny and chaos. Just like we are preparing for the Imam by trying to establish justice, they're preparing for their Messiah by establishing injustice and tyranny and oppression. Okay, so they're like the opposite of us. But they're like us in the sense they know what's coming. They believe in God. They believe in the prophets. The difference between us and them is we're trying to serve the Imam of the time. They're trying to find him so that they can kill him. Okay, and this is going to again be very difficult for people to stomach because all of us are just ordinary people caught in the middle. We're either being pulled in this direction towards the Imam of the time, or we're being pulled in that direction towards the Shaitan and to the Mashiach. Okay, and so most people are just in the middle. They're like, and for most people, if they understand that God exists, then obviously the devil also exists, and therefore we should be good people. If the prophet really is the messenger of God, we should obey him. Their debate is about whether he really is the prophet of God or not. Their debate is whether he really is the Imam of the time or not. Their debate is about whether he is Jesus, whether he really was a great man who we should follow or not. Once they come to that conclusion, they're going to follow him. But for these people, it's not like that. These people, they want to recognize him, they know him, and they want to kill him. Okay, so the mentality that they have is a mentality which, again, it will be too difficult for us to understand unless we reflect on the verses of the Quran and what the Quran is actually trying to tell us. Ya ayyuhan nas, it says so often, O human beings, do not worship shaitan. La ta'budu shaitan. And notice that this is in Surah Yasin, a surah that we recite all the time, especially if somebody dies. We recite it, but we don't contemplate over it. We have to ask ourselves, if Allah is telling us not to worship shaitan, that's so bizarre. That's so weird. Obviously, I'm not going to worship shaitan. Why would I do that? You have to understand that there are people who recognize shaitan, they know shaitan, intimately know shaitan. Remember, he's just a jinn. If you can know a jinn, you can know shaitan. They know him and they choose to obey him. They choose to follow his commandments. That might give you a bit of a creepy feeling inside, and that's fine. That's normal. That's because you're a good, normal, decent human being. Our enemies are not like that, dear brothers and sisters. They are twisted. They are psychopathic. They are so evil that all these actions that you see them doing in Palestine, killing all these children, and you might have seen some very disturbing videos where they're shooting children on the spot, and there's no doubt that they have targeted that child. That's something which is unthinkable for us. Even if there was the child of an Israeli settler in front of us, most of us have enough taqwa to hesitate 10 times before we even think about killing that person. I just want to quickly say this story because these are the kinds of stories that you won't often get to hear. But when you're in the Hawza and when you're meeting with people from Lebanon and from Syria and from Yemen, you hear so many incredible tales. I wish we had time for me to share a lot of them with you. One story goes like this. Back in 2006, right? So pre 2006, bear this in mind, everybody thought Israel is invincible. It was Hezbollah through bi'idhnillah, why by the permission of Allah, they were the first ones to strategically defeat Israel. And that shattered this image of Israel being ultimate and powerful and unbreakable. Okay. Subhanallah, if you believe and you fight in the way of Allah, Allah does show you miracles. It's like the story of David versus Goliath, right? Where Dawood, this great prophet of Allah, is only young, he's very small, he's a prophet of God. And he defeats Goliath, who is this titan of a man. And it was unbelievable for people. But through his wit and using the catapult, or not catapult, the sling that he had, he actually took out Jalut, he took out Goliath. So the story goes like this. There was a Hezbollah operative, and he was about to shoot one of the top commanders of Israel, the top commanders, and he has him in his sight. He's just about to take the shot when a child walks into the shot. Okay, the child walks in front. So imagine you're looking through your you're looking through the scope of the sniper, and you can see. Let's imagine Netanyahu. Okay, to make this really real for us, and to use somebody that we all collectively hate from the pits of our hearts. Imagine you've got Netanyahu. You can take him out. All right. And that's going to change the entire landscape. You might even be victorious, and the whole world is going to be celebrating if you do that, right? You have him in your shot. At that moment, a child walks in front. What would you do? This Hezbollah operative, he's shaking and he calls the senior commander. The senior commander tells him, no, don't take the shot. Subhanallah. Now, you might have watched the Fire at Will, and I'm talking about how we don't differentiate between soldier and civilian. All occupiers in Israel are fair game for us, and I would like to repeat that. That's true. And in the coming war, inshallah, we might see collateral damage, and we should not be shaken by that. However, in this example, what we see is the compassion of even our military commanders. People like Hajj Qasim, people like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, people like the Shuhada that we just saw give their lives in Tehran. Um, what happens? He has him in his scope, the child moves away, and in his place, another commander, an Israeli commander, comes into the scope. So now he's not only going to take out one of them, but he was able to take out two of the top military commanders and fieldmen of Israel. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala practically rewards our taqwa, right? If he had taken the shot, he would have taken out a commander, but the child would have died as well. And that's something that we don't want. We are Muslims. We don't think like the enemy thinks. In fact, I would like to say we can't think like the enemy thinks. Even if we tried to, we can't. These are a people who want to wipe out not just us, not just our deen, not just our um, revolutionaries. No, 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 no. Once they're done with the revolutionaries, they want to kill all Shias. Once they've killed all the Shias, they want to kill all Sunnis. Once they've killed all the Sunnis, they want to kill everybody, even the Christians. And if you go to their books, you will find the realities there. All Goyim eventually need to be killed. And everybody in their totalitarian, messianic, um, ideal world, everybody is given a choice. What is that choice? That choice is very simple. Either you become one of the 2,800 slaves, which is promised to every Jew in their Akhirul Zaman, or you die. That's going to be your choice. And so I would like to reiterate at this point, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, Iran is not just fighting for itself, it is fighting for everybody. And I would like to expand on that and make us understand that everybody in the Muslim world who is resisting against Israel, whether it is the honorable warriors of Yemen, or it is the Syrians, or it is the Iraqis, or everybody, and the Palestinians, of course, it should go without saying, everybody who is resisting against that tyrant oppressor is fighting for every soul on earth. And I would go a step further, in fact, and say all of those people in the Western world and in the Eastern world who are voicing their support for Palestine, who are standing against Netanyahu and his criminal thugs, who are boycotting the oppressors, all of these people, subhanallah, all of these people, dear brothers and sisters, have aligned themselves effectively with the movement of Imam al-Hujjah al-Qa'im al-Mahdi, with Imam al-Hujjah, the proof of God on earth. Okay, they've all aligned themselves with him, knowingly or unknowingly. And I'd like to bring here the hadith and remind everybody again. When the Hujjah comes, the Imams alayhimussalam warned us, they told us about this in different ways, in various ways. They kept on giving us clues. That's why I keep on telling you guys, go to the hadith and read them, understand what era we're in and what we're about to see. They said many of those who claim to follow Imam Zaman, who are serving the path of Imam Zaman, they are going to reject Imam Mahdi. And many of those who maybe follow the moon and the sun and the stars, random people you would never imagine, those people are going to accept the Imam when he comes. What does this mean? Really, think about it. What is the Imam of the time, alayhi salam, that many Shi'as would reject him? What is it about this Imam that would make our people, those scholars even who we love and respect, some of them might reject him? We have to be prepared for anything. What qualities does this Imam of the time have that we have been praying for him all this time, and yet we are going to reject him? What? What is it? How is it possible? Could it be that he will be somebody who is very unexpected? Could it be that when he comes, the Shias call him Sunni, some of the Sunnis call him Shia, some of the Westerners and the Easterners, maybe they call him a terrorist? Of course they're going to do that. Without a doubt, they're going to call him a terrorist. And many of our people who are following the thinking, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء. The Quran tells us very clearly, do not take the Jews and the Christians as awliya. Do not take them as guardians. Don't translate it as friends, because of course you can be friends with a Jew and a Christian, maybe not a Jew, but Christians. You can be friends with all sorts of people, with Sikhs, with Hindus. You can be friends with all sorts of people. But can you take them as authority figures? Can you take them as people from whom you derive your understanding of the world? No. Can you take them as people who decide what is right and wrong for you? Can you take them as your judges? No. Can you take them as, just to extrapolate, as those whose words you listen to, and then you build your understanding of certain affairs on what they're saying? On political affairs, for example? Their political analysis, their economic analysis? Can we do that? And that's a vital question that we have to ask ourselves. And again, it brings us back to the Holy Quran. This Quran is the thing which will guide us to the Mahdi alayhi salam. This Quran is something which is screaming at us out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to understand. Look at Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There were witnesses, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, witnesses who saw the blessed head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the spear. Put yourself into that scene and notice what would happen to you if you saw a man's head. Notice many people at that time might not have understood that this is the Imam of the time. This is the man that we were supposed to follow. This is the man who tells us what the deen is. Many people might not have understood that. You see a man, his head is on a spike, on a spear, and his blessed lips are moving. And when you go closer to it, you can hear what he is saying. And it must have been very beautiful, actually, because there are ahadith that say that when the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam would recite the Quran, they would recite it so beautifully that even some of the enemies would hear it and their hearts would tremble. I remember this one hadith where it was entirely dark and the Prophet is reciting his night prayers in the pitch blackness. And one of the uncles of the Prophet who had rejected him, one of the kuffar, one of the polytheists, snuck into the room just so that he could listen to the Prophet. He rejected the Prophet, but he wanted to listen to him because it was so soothing. It was so beautiful. And at one point, somebody turns the light on, somebody lights a candle, and suddenly they see each other. When the lights go on, he sees that other enemies are in the room as well. They're also there to listen to the Prophet. And these hypocrites, when they see each other, they get embarrassed and they scatter and they leave. They didn't want to admit how beautiful the reality of the Quran is. Okay, so they get closer to the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They're so curious, they want to listen to it. What is this? Am I imagining this first of all, or is this a reality? What is the verse that the blessed lips of Imam Hussein alayhi salam are reciting? أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. Or do you suppose that the companions of the cave, the people of the cave, the youths of the cave, and the inscription were among his extraordinary signs? Such a strange verse. There's another verse, of course, where somebody else heard him say a different verse. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Soon will the oppressors know with which overturning they will be overturned. Now, that verse in the context of Karbala to most people makes sense. And so that's the verse that they recite from the pulpits. They tell them this is the verse that Imam Hussein alayhi salam recited when his head was on the spike. And that may be true. But I want to draw our attention to this verse. Why is he talking about Surah Kaf? Of all surahs and all the verses, why Surah Kaf? Why the surah of the cave? Why is he drawing our attention to this surah? This, inshallah, because we've run out of time, we're going to be talking about more in a later session. But here, I want to suffice by just reminding everybody that the Imam, alayhi salam, up until his last breath, was calling people towards this book. And even after he had already drawn his final breath, even after he had been martyred and his blessed head was on a spear, even, even after that, he is calling towards haqq, he's calling towards truth. Dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, if you want the haqq, go back to the Quran. Understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. Recognize that miracles exist. Recognize the divine patterns of the Quran. When you go back to this book, inshallah, I'm going to expand on this in a much clearer way, inshallah, in tomorrow's session. But for now, understand that there are divine patterns in that book, which when you recognize those patterns, they will help you to understand your present, your past, and indeed your future. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Because we're out of time, I would like to open the floor for any questions that you guys might have, inshallah, and then what we'll do is we'll end the session. So, are there any questions? Please do raise your hand. Uh, Question from Sister Fatima Hatab says, we shouldn't see them as guides, or we will, or are we literally not allowed to take their opinions, i.e., reading socio-political, psychological, historic books written by them, and how do we draw the line between the two? Okay, yeah, it's actually a very fantastic question. First of all, no, you should learn from wherever knowledge is, right? Gain that knowledge, especially if it's a science that some people have access to that others might not have an access to. Even Imam Khamenei, one of his favorite books is Les Miserables. It's spelt as Les Miserables. Now, if you read the book or if you watch the movie, you'll see that there are really poignant themes about revolution. And of course, it's a French book. So you do need to understand that you can gain things from them, but that's when your own foundation and your own basis is strong. You're not building your worldview on what they have said. So even a lot of this psychological stuff that you might be reading, psychiatry, of course, the father of modern psychiatry is Freud, and a lot of Freudian ideas have influenced politics, they've influenced education, they've influenced so much of what the Western world has become, and it's influenced a lot of the Muslim world and the Eastern world also. And it's very dangerous. If you go back, you'll see that this is a person who was entirely materialistic. And all of modern psychology, for example, it's all based on the material. It has no space or any consideration for the soul of a human being, the spiritual side of a human being. And a lot of it, unfortunately, just comes down to base desires. So that's an example. Even history, you need to be able to read history, but again, reflect it back on the Quran and understand that certain things might have been lied about. Surah Kaf is actually a really good example for how you're reading something that the Westerners have created, but you're using your own principles to look at it. So the lens that you're looking at the world through is the lens of God, a divine lens. So if you notice in Surah Kaf, it tells you that they debate about how many people were in the cave. Okay, so that some of them say there were six of them and the seventh of them was a dog. Some say there were seven and eight of them was a dog. And then Allah says, "La ta'lamuna illa qalila." You do not know except a very little. Okay, so when you take that verse and then you look at history, it's going to be a different thing. Because now you've taken that verse, and that verse is showing you that people debate all the time about nitty-gritty details, and they're ignoring the bigger picture. So when you take that lens and then look at historians, you're going to understand, okay, this historian has an opinion, but so does this one and this one and this one. I need to look at all the different opinions and then come to a consensus.
Yes, some of them might say that this many died, some might say that that many died, some might say that many died. The consensus is this: around about this figure died. And the important thing is people died. Just like when you go back to the verse, all right, some say there were this many, some people say there were that many. The important thing is there were people in a cave. Okay? So in this way, Allah is giving you the foundational principles